Firstpost reports from the world's second largest continent. Hello, I'm Alison Lagrange. A very warm welcome from Durban, South Africa. We get you the news and the newsmakers from Africa. From elections to climate change to innovations and opportunities. As the world's attention shifts, we report from Africa, the heart of the global south. Join me every weekday live on Firstpost. Hello and welcome to Firstpost Africa, where we get you the top stories from the continent and from across the world. I'm Alison Lagrange, coming to you live from Durban, South Africa. First, let's take a look at the headlines. Asian markets are headed for their worst week since April, after the US imposed steep tariffs ranging from 10% to 41% on dozens of trading partners, dealing a blow to exports from India, Taiwan, Thailand, and others. France says it is sending 4 planes carrying 10 tons of humanitarian aid to Gaza from Jordan amid a revolting situation of severe starvation in the Strip. The Democratic Republic of Congo and Rwanda hold their first talks in Washington, following a June peace deal aimed at ending decades of deadly conflict in mineral-rich eastern DRC. Pakistan issues fresh calls for Afghans in the southwest to leave, triggering a mass border rush after revoking residence permits and threatening arrests for those who stay. And heavy rains trigger deadly flooding in Vietnam's Dien Bien province, leaving at least 14 dead or missing and cutting off roads and power to several areas. Hello and welcome. Let's begin with Kenya. The country has seen violent anti-government protests in recent days. Reported police brutality and crackdown on dissent has further fueled public anger. As tensions and public discontentment remain high across the country, a new government policy has sparked outrage in Kenya. Nairobi has introduced sweeping new rules to control the sale and consumption of alcohol. Kenya's National Authority for the Campaign Against Alcohol and Drug Abuse has unveiled the new rules, which have been labeled as one of the most aggressive anti-alcohol policies the country has ever seen. Let's take a look at some of the major changes under the new rules. The minimum drinking age shall be raised from 18 to 21 years. Anyone under 21 will no longer be allowed to enter any place that sells alcohol, regardless of whether they are with an adult. Purchase of alcohol in supermarkets, restaurants, and on public transport shall be banned. Consumption of alcohol at public beaches, public parks, amusement parks, petrol stations shall be prohibited. Promotion, advertising, sponsorship, and marketing targeting children and persons under the age of 21 shall be banned. Authorities have backed the sweeping new rules, saying that these are crucial to address substance abuse among Kenyan youth. As per the country's official data, alcohol remains the most commonly abused substance in Kenya. 1 in every 20 Kenyans aged between 15 to 24 years consumes alcohol, and 1 in every 20 Kenyans is addicted to it. Now, Kenya's new alcohol ban policy has sparked anger, especially among traders and alcohol manufacturers. Critics warn that the sweeping rules could trigger a crisis in the alcohol industry, cause widespread job losses, push consumers toward illicit alcohol market, negatively impact Kenya's hospitality sector, and destroy the country's economy. Now, despite previous such attempts to curb the menace of alcohol abuse, the issue has persisted in the country, with dozens of people having died from consumption of harmful alcohol. In 2023, then Deputy President Rigathi Gachagua proposed a radical step to reduce alcohol abuse in Kenya's central region, seen as the worst hit by the menace. Now, the minister proposed that the county government should only allow one pub per town, but bar and restaurant owners accused the government of unnecessarily targeting legitimate businesses. And in the end, the plan fell apart. Now, there's a new policy promising to fulfill an old concern regarding alcohol abuse. And right after being unveiled, it is being met with heavy criticism. Now, it remains to be seen if Kenya's sweeping alcohol ban policy curbs an old menace or sparks new protests in the country. Narima Wako, who is the Executive Director of Siasa Place and a political analyst, joining us live from Nairobi. Thank you for being with us.
Thanks for having me.
Now, how effective are measures like raising the legal drinking age and banning alcohol sales in supermarkets likely to be in tackling substance abuse among the youth in Kenya?
So such measures may seem like proactive public health strategies, but evidence shows us that these measures alone are rarely effective, and especially in isolation. So in Kenya's case, our major challenge, our main problem is enforcement. Many underage youth already access alcohol through informal channels. You talked about illicit brews, unregulated kiosks, or even social circles. Right now, schools have closed for the holidays, and I know this is a concern for parents and also for institutions, but moving legal alcohol sales from supermarkets to pubs completely changes the way things have been structured for a long time, because most of our supermarkets do sell alcohol. It's going to bring a lot of change. So it might actually increase exposure to riskier drinking environments where people are going to be drinking now underground and hiding while they drink. And banning it, we're not looking at the main challenges of youth unemployment or mental stress, peer pressure, and other factors that lead young people to drink.
Yes. The underlying causes, yes. And Narima, critics argue that these proposed regulations could severely damage the hospitality, retail, and transport sectors. What do you see as the potential economic ripple effects if the plan is implemented in its current form?
Absolutely, it will send shockwaves to several sectors. There are a lot of businesses that are still recovering from COVID-19. People are still stabilizing, and alcohol sales actually keep a lot of businesses afloat. And so what we are looking at is we are probably going to create an economic crisis while they're trying to fix a health crisis. This could cripple supply chains overnight. And interestingly, government uses a lot of alcohol tax when they're collecting revenue. So this is also going to impact the amount of allocation that government is going to be able to have.
Yes. And given Kenya's socio-cultural and economic realities, as you've mentioned there, in your view, are there alternative approaches that could more efficiently and effectively balance public health concerns with individual freedoms and industry viability?
Absolutely. I believe a balance evidence-based approach would be super helpful in terms of how do we find harm reduction strategies. We've always had zoning laws, so following those zoning laws where pubs cannot be put up in a proximity to schools, for instance. So better licensing, better ways of checking IDs so that they are not sold to minors is important. And then this private and public partnership is also important. So I would say smart policy, finding ways that we're able to work with community rather than these stringent ways that people are going to find alternatives of getting alcohol and hiding it from families and parents.
Absolutely. Nerima, thank you very much for being with us on Firstpost Africa. And shifting focus now, the U.S. aid cuts announced by President Donald Trump have triggered massive disruptions across Africa, from medical programs to development projects. Key sectors are struggling, and millions of lives are now at risk. But while these cuts are a base for many, they are proving to be a boon for some. Now, why and who? Now, terrorists. The U.S. aid cuts could fuel terrorism in Africa. This is not speculation, but a warning by the United Nations. The United Nations is particularly concerned about Nigeria, where the cuts could empower Boko Haram. Now, Boko Haram is a violent Islamist group based in northeast Nigeria. Founded in the early 2000s, the group rejects Western education, secular rule, and promotes a strict version of Sharia law. Since 2009, it has waged a brutal insurgency across the region and is one of the deadliest terror groups in the world. And now the aid shortfall is opening doors for such groups. How? As the aid cuts make it easier for terrorists to lure youth and to spread insecurity across the region. This is according to the United Nations. The World Food Programme is sounding the alarm due to shrinking donor support. It is suspending emergency aid in northwest Nigeria. Now, 1.3 million people are at risk of severe hunger and malnutrition. The region is already battered by extremism and now faces food insecurity. Aid groups say that the clock is ticking on a full-blown humanitarian disaster. The United States remains the largest donor to the WFP. But this year, donations to the WFP dropped by 40% compared to last year. And by March of this year, the US had contributed only 10% of its previous total. The impact on the ground is already visible. Malnutrition rates have spiked. 652 children have reportedly died from malnutrition in just 6 months in Nigeria. And this is a jackpot for terror groups. Boko Haram preys on hunger, poverty, and desperation. When aid is withdrawn, they step in with promises of food, money, and safety, operate in areas abandoned by aid agencies, filling the void with propaganda and recruitment. Nigeria is Africa's most populous nation. It is also among its most vulnerable. Inflation, corruption, and a failing economy have deepened the crisis. And while the US under Trump enacts tough policies, it is up to the Nigerian government to protect its people and to stop the spread of extremism. And US aid cuts are not the only moves targeting Africa. Sweeping new travel restrictions are also in place, but some African nations are fighting back. Ghana is among those hit by Washington's new visa rules. In response, it is boosting travel ties with other nations. Ghana has signed visa waiver agreements with multiple global South countries, including Colombia, Mozambique, Dominica, and the Sao Tome and Principe. Earlier, it also sealed a mutual visa waiver with Morocco, and Ghanaians can now travel visa-free to all of these countries. And more agreements are in the pipeline, according to officials. Now, President John Mahama's government says that the goal is to make the Ghanaian passport among the most powerful in the developing world. They are also rolling out strict security protocols to prevent abuse by criminal networks. The shift comes after the United States revised its visa policy for Ghana last month, limiting tourist, business and academic travelers to single-entry visas valid for just 3 months. Other countries facing similar restrictions include Cameroon, Ethiopia and Nigeria. And since Donald Trump's return to the White House, the US has imposed some of the harshest travel bans on Africa, including a complete entry ban for citizens from Chad, the Republic of Congo, Eritrea, Libya, Somalia and Sudan. And the restrictions may spread further. A leaked US State Department cable warned that up to 36 countries, including Ghana, could face future bans. Travel restrictions could have a serious impact on Ghana. The country received $4.6 billion in remittances from the US in 2023. This is the second highest in Africa after Nigeria. But while the US shuts its doors, many African countries are moving in a different direction, forging visa-free partnerships across the global south. Ghana is not the only one. Kenya also scrapped visa requirements for most African countries last month. Tanzania granted visa-free entry to Angolan nationals in April, and then Rwanda offered visa-free access to all African nationals, and Benin also allows 90-day visa-free stays for any African Union passport holder. Analysts say the African continent pushing for a pan-African e-visa system can boost trade, tourism, and unity. The message is clear. If one door closes, another opens. That too in Africa's own neighborhood. And for our last story today, let's move to South Africa. The country is scrambling to sign a trade deal with the US as the new August 7th deadline looms. As trade tensions remain high with Washington, Pretoria is deepening ties with Beijing. And in its attempts to do so, Ramaphosa government has drawn Taiwan's ire. The self-ruled island has accused South Africa of unilaterally downgrading Taiwan's representative offices in Pretoria and Cape Town without prior consultation or bilateral agreement. Both offices have reportedly been reclassified from diplomatic missions to international organizations on South Africa's official website. Though the two offices still remain operational, Taipei has slammed Pretoria of bowing to Chinese pressure and undermining Taiwan's dignity and sovereignty. Beijing has long claimed the self-ruled island is a part of its own territory and has not ruled out the use of force to annex it. Taiwan has condemned South Africa's move as a violation of the spirit of the 1997 bilateral agreement that allowed Taiwan to maintain a presence in the country after diplomatic ties were severed in 1998. Justifying its move to downgrade Taiwan's representative offices, South Africa cited a UN resolution, to which is often misused by Beijing, to assert its exclusive legitimacy over Taiwan. Irked by Ramaphosa government's pro-China stance, now Taiwan is reportedly planning to retaliate by restricting semiconductor exports to South Africa. Though Taiwan is not a major chip supplier to South Africa, it plays a dominant role in global semiconductor production, and even limited restrictions on exports may serve as a diplomatic warning to South Africa. Feeling pressured by President Trump's hardline trade policies, South Africa is leaving no stone unturned to boost economic ties with China. Now, this is because a trade deal with the US seems unlikely. So, South Africa cannot afford to ignore China's crucial role as an alternative market. Beijing is also taking full advantage of the current situation to deepen its influence across Africa. In June, China announced a plan to scrap tariffs on all products from 53 African countries. excluding Eswatini, which recognizes Taiwan. Beijing said the move was aimed at boosting trade with the continent. However, experts have warned against over-reliance on China, urging diversification due to risks like China's economic slowdown and sectoral oversupply. Now, one thing is clear. South Africa's move to reroute trade affected by US tariffs to China is not only risky, but it might come at the cost of letting Beijing reshape the country's foreign policy to its liking. And that's it on the show for today. We will see you again at the same time on Monday. Thank you for watching. Have a great weekend and goodbye.
Hello and a very warm welcome. I am Gushin Garland and you're watching Firstpost. In the next few minutes, I get you the top 40 updates from around the world, only here on Fast and Factual. Let's get started. We begin with the tariff war of US President Donald Trump. President Trump announced sharp new tariffs on nearly 70 countries, including a 35% duty on Canadian goods and a delayed increase on Mexican imports. Tariffs now range up to 41%, with additional penalties for goods rerouted through third countries. Some nations like Taiwan and Cambodia saw reductions from earlier threats. China was not affected by this round but faces possible tariff hike on August 12th. US envoy Steve Witkoff met Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu to push for a ceasefire and more aid to Gaza. The meeting happened on Thursday as famine looms in the enclave. Washington also imposed sanctions on Palestinian Authority officials, saying they were undermining peace talks. According to health officials, at least 23 aid seekers were killed in Gaza during aid delivery on Thursday. US says it will finalize a new plan to rush food deliveries into Gaza after a site visit on Friday. Israel struck Hezbollah's missile manufacturing and storage sites in southern Lebanon and the eastern Bekaa Valley. Israel Defense Minister said forces struck Hezbollah's biggest precision missile manufacturing site. The Israeli military said it targeted infrastructure that was used for producing and storing strategic weapons. Lebanon's state-run media also reported strikes in the Bekaa and the south. The death toll from massive Russian airstrikes in Ukraine's capital Kyiv has risen to 28. More than 150 people were injured in one of the deadliest attacks on Kyiv this summer. Ukrainian officials said over 300 drones and missiles were launched overnight. Though air defenses intercepted many, multiple targets were hit, including residential buildings. Germany will deliver 2 additional Patriot air defense systems to Ukraine under a new agreement with the United States. In return, Berlin will receive updated Patriot systems from the US on priority. Germany's defense minister said launchers would be sent in the coming days, with full components following within months. The move comes as Ukraine faces increased Russian aerial attacks. Berlin clarified that this support will not affect its commitment to NATO. El Salvador's ruling party scrapped presidential term limits on Thursday. The move cleared the way for President Nayib Bukele to seek another term. The law extended presidential terms to over 6 years and removed runoff votes. Opposition lawmakers said the change was rushed and will strengthen one-party rule. Bukele remains popular despite growing concerns over loss of democratic freedoms. India's vice presidential election will take place on September 9 following Jagdeep Dhankar's resignation. The Election Commission announced the full schedule with August 21 set